When was the first moment you knew you were going to love a game? Maybe it was the vibe the opening cutscene gave off. Maybe it came through that musical score that hit at just the right time. Or possibly it could just be the simple excitement of stepping into something new. There's a lot of factors that have to coalesce for any piece of media to work effectively. From the marketing, to time restraints, and even team management all play a part in the quality of the end product. Because of this highly consumer-focused model, along with the emphasis on incorporating popular trends, it means having a neat idea for a scene or gameplay section is often left on the cutting room floor, as there simply isn't time for its implementation. Because it's safer and easier to use the new forms of monetization to offset a title's budget and use its scale to draw in as many people as possible for something that ultimately feels hollow, like a dessert that's nice to eat but doesn't fulfill you like a proper meal would. This would be a description I'd use for something like Gears 5, because I cannot remember much about it. I know I've played it, I mean, looking at these achievements, someone in this house had to get it, but if you put a gun to my head and asked what happened in its story, I could not tell you. Maybe it was flashy, and maybe it was fun in the moment, but it was just utterly forgettable. And this was just over 2 years ago. The biggest complaint I can give about Gears 5 is that I don't think about it. I don't remember any multiplayer maps, I don't remember anything I did during those 24 hours, and I can't remember anything about its story. But if you were to ask me about Gears of War 2, I think of this scene with Dom, or this boss fight which randomly switches your secondary weapon to a Gnasher, or even this little Easter egg.
Who wants toast? I like them crispy.
And I know, it's such a stupid, silly little moment, but I still think about it. I don't think about anything in Gears 5, and I don't say that to be mean, because clearly there's a lot of hard work that went into it, but in broad strokes, it didn't mean anything. What made Gears of War 2 so memorable to me is that it was little moments like this that I still think about all these years later, because they just had an impact. And sure, you could put it down to simple nostalgia, but what made it special was that it felt like this small hidden moment that was just put there for the sake of it rather than having to worry about putting in another set piece. You don't have to go far to see people talking about their favourite memories with games, because it shows more often than not there are people behind these things that are probably fans as well. It doesn't go on box art or get shown in marketing, but it's these little moments of character and design that show something cool or funny and just plain enjoyable which can often go unsung. So I think it's time someone talked about them.
My xenoscience studies range from urban to agrarian. I am the very model of a scientist Solarian.
So before we dive in, I think it's worth drawing a line in the sand here to say I'm not going to be focused on Easter eggs. Usually I'd make a fancy title card and give each section its own flair, but the truth is, I think trying to define a moment comes down to personal subjection. So stuff like character interaction or gameplay sections which stood out is what I'm aiming for here. So after saying that, I am very quickly going to break this rule and talk about Easter eggs. Much like everyone else following that live action trailer, I've been going through something of an existential crisis. Like, really? Marky Mark as Sully. Why not just do an animated film and get all the voice actors back, or here's another idea, maybe just don't do it. So much of the appeal for Uncharted has been how it's able to distill all the best components of a summer blockbuster into a tightly paced, action-packed experience that also has the benefit of being multiple hours long. It gives the ability to tell its story rather than being constrained by the medium it pulls its influence from. It doesn't focus on upgrades or dialogue trees, but instead giving you the experience of being the world's unluckiest and somehow luckiest treasure hunter in existence. Each shootout and fistfight all flow together as one concentrated adrenaline rush. I mean, how could anything possibly top the truck chase in A Thief's End? But the truth is, that isn't my favorite chapter. That actually happens much earlier in the most quiet and mundane section, aptly titled in Chapter 4 as A Normal Life. It shares a lot of similar DNA with Among Thieves' Where Am I chapter, in how it removes all the usual puzzle solving or combat encounters to just let us take a breather in this quiet setting. And while that level is used as a quick pit stop before getting us back into the plot, this time around it takes that approach to its logical extreme in that it slows down even further in service of the story. The opening to Uncharted 4 is significantly slower and more restrained than its predecessors, and this also does include the Vita game. By having us sit in the uneventful surroundings of Nate's modern life, it humanizes him in a way that we haven't really been able to see up until now. The attic is filled with all these trinkets from our previous adventures. The ring, Shambhala, even the toy gun in a sense gives us a little bit of reprise of the gunplay which we're going to experience later on. This extends to the other rooms that all feel similar in how they're messy, cozy, but lived in. There's this wedding album that sits beside the bed, or the articles and post-it notes that litter the workroom. It took 3 games and nearly 10 years of investment to feel that this relationship we've had with Nate, and he's having with Elena, feels fleshed out. This whole dinner scene is such a nice intimate exchange that we feel as if we're a fly on the wall observing it all unfold, because we have been. Throughout all this journey we've seen the ups and downs of this relationship, and seeing it here feels oddly comforting that we've been on it so long. The fact you also get to play Crash Bandicoot is a nice touch as well. Another great example of this comes early into Gears of War 3, when Cole returns to his hometown inside the Hanover Stadium. He finds his former sports locker from his glory days as a pro athlete. For a character as extroverted and energetic as him, it just feels right to have this small section with him. The triumphant music and sepia-tone filter give it this warm feeling of nostalgia that you get when you're looking at an old photograph. It's why that snapback to reality hits so much harder than it ever did before, because you're given this chance to reminisce on what life used to be like before this war ever kicked in. It makes these massive portraits of masculinity feel more normal and human, which is a nice thing to see, especially this late into a series run. What makes both these scenes special is that they have this feeling of normality in franchises that rarely ever feature this, and maybe it's because they both serve as finales to their respective series, or, at least one of them did. There's a room to let these silly moments feel more earned, but there's also something to be said about just having fun with ridiculousness. Like, take Evil Within 2. This super serious, super hard survival horror game has this bit where if you go back to the safe room in Chapter 7, this happens.
I told you I wasn't going to leave this place. It's fucking evil out there.
That may be, but there's evil within, too.
I don't have anything to say about it, I just think it's funny. The safe room is one of those things we've always taken for granted as they're so commonplace, but if you're like me and feel the need to lock in your progress every few minutes because you can't remember when the last time you did it was, even though it was clearly 6 seconds ago, there is always a sense of comfort to them. And I always enjoy when they play around with different styles. Like with Evil Within, you can get coffee to regenerate your health. In Resident Evil 7, there's this sort of eerie but still comforting guitar twang when you go in. I quite enjoy this music. I love to use it myself when I'm doing editing for photos and stuff. A great one is in Alien Isolation, where when you start saving, you have to go through an anxious 3 seconds of just waiting for the card to load up. And just before he hits it, did he just sit beside me? So there's a lot of games out there that have collectibles. Coins, rings, Riddler trophies, better than Funko Pops, and feathers. So many feathers. Their purpose is to serve as busy work that encourages the player to look all around its world to receive a reward for their efforts. Most of the time it feels like it's put in for padding, but at the same time, not all of them have the charm of the mini-kit. Yes, if you played any of the LEGO games, you probably remember spending a few late nights before primary school tracking these ones down, or just sticking on the mini-kit detector with red bricks, but you know what, we all stick them all on all the time, so don't worry about it.
You must be truly desperate to come to me for help.
The sound they give off has definitely been stuck in my head for the last 16 years, and this extends to all the other collectibles, whether it's the gold bricks, red bricks, the blue mini kits, I don't know, I never really went for them, or maybe achieving the coveted True Jedi rank. Tracking them down on subsequent playthroughs felt rewarding because they could only be done on later attempts, and the sound design played a big role in making each step worthwhile. Another form this effort can be rewarded with is upgrades. When you put the work into something, getting a bonus whether in weaponry or cosmetics goes a long way in helping you feel like you're advancing on your journey. For free houses, your students achieve new armor when advancing to a new class, or in Dead Space 2 when you buy a new suit, you get this little animation play out of you just suiting up with the new upgrades. It's super cool to see because so often you're placed in the underdog position, and with these upgrades, it feels as if you're stepping up to the challenge to take on the upcoming threats. And after starting out so weak, it feels good to finally try and fight back. A lot of the examples I've given are primarily focused on external rewards, but there's this really cool exception where you don't actually have to do what the game asks to be rewarded. There's this bit in Luigi's Mansion 3 when you reach the 8th floor called Paranormal Productions. In every level up until this point, you've had to track down and fight the enemy ghost of each respective floor, and they all have the very clear intention of trying to hurt the literal best Mario brother. But on this floor, you meet Morty, the living embodiment of cinematic art students going into their final film. He doesn't want to fight you, instead, unlike every other encounter, you actually help him complete his task of shooting an old-fashioned kaiju film. And once it's done, he just gives you an elevator key and just goes on his way. In fact, if you go and visit his office later on, you can see the completed film, color-corrected and everything. And I don't know why it makes me so happy, but it's how it stands in complete opposition to everything that comes before and after, which just makes it really cool. Unless you decide to capture him, and all I gotta say is... who hurt you?
Congratulations, you played yourself.
Now, is there a point to any of this? Really, you could skip many of these individual scenes in your mind and just focus on the big picture, like boss fights or big story moments. And true, in the grand scheme of things, they aren't the most important parts of any game, but that doesn't mean that they should have any less value. If you've played the Citadel DLC for Mass Effect 3, you probably know what I'm talking about, because nothing truly significant happens in this one-off mission, except just hanging out with your squad mates, and also this line of dialogue exists.
My turn. 69.
Nice.
Really, when you think of the amount of effort that has to go into any piece of work, it's easy just to lose track of things. We're so focused on reaching the end goal that so often you forget about the little moments of life, because video games, like all of our mediums, exist in this heightened reality. We want to escape our daily worries and just get lost in the experience, whether it is in action or fighting, or maybe sometimes it's just living a different person's life. Maybe we don't have to experience loss of loved ones to empathize with characters on screen. Maybe we don't have to have these exact same experiences to empathize with them, but in some regards, I think media give us a chance to experience things we don't always get to see in our real life, or in some respects, it just lets us see things from a different perspective, and from someone who's probably lived a life longer than us. It's why I love the party scene so much, because it's literally just getting the chance to hang out with your friends. You can sit here as long as you like. The only thing holding this section back is literally just you deciding when to move on to the next part of it, and just seeing like all these people that you've got to know over the last 3 games just hang out, chat, party, flirt. It feels genuine in a way. It reminds me of my nights out in college and university. It may not be the exact same thing. In some respects, it does capture that real feeling that I think a lot of people have just missed out on, especially in the last few years. Because it's weird, it's funny, and it's unlike anything about what's to come next in the story. It's just this chance to live life in the moment. I wish more games would do this, because these are what will stay with you long after the credits roll. And I think that's something worth appreciating.
just walking blind. Don't forget that there is always hope to find. Choose your path, walk it well, break out from this living